Welcome to Kentucky,
the birthplace of Abraham Lincoln and built on the largest cave system in the known world. The home of Daniel Boone, Hunter S. Thompson, horse racing, and bourbon.
That when the hour grows late, the bluegrass state becomes the breeding ground for realms beyond those familiar to the human race. In the east, ghosts, spirits, and ethereal entities roam the hills and hollers.
In the north, Mothman beats his wings along the banks of the Ohio River.
To the west, small green creatures stalk farmhouses and disappear without a trace when shot.
While in the south, the energy of the Veiled Witch is palpable just over the border. Joining with us as we investigate just what goes wrong in the bluegrass night.
And ask the question, how many coincidences are too many? There's no need to check the clock.
There's no need to check the clock. Time is an illusion.
Time is an illusion.
And it's midnight.
It's midnight. In Kentucky.
In Kentucky.
In Kentucky. In Kentucky. In Kentucky. In Kentucky. In Kentucky.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is the midnight hour once again for Midnight in Kentucky. I'm Ben.
I'm Stephen.
As always, if you would please leave us some ratings and reviews. We've had some great ones recently, and we've taken a huge time off. So, if that's you guys being like, hey, come back, 2 more episodes, we heard you loud and clear. We are back. We're doing more episodes. But for real, we want to thank everybody who's left us a review and a rating recently. You guys are awesome, and it makes my day every time I read one, and I'm sure it does Stevens too. But you can do that on iTunes. You can do that on Facebook. Just leave us a review on Facebook there. And if you would, follow us on all our social media channels. If you're digging what we're doing here at Midnight Kentucky, you can find us on Facebook,
Twitter,
YouTube,
and MidnightKentucky.com.
And, of course, that YouTube is our publishing company, YouTube Ransom Letter Publishing. There's a lot of new content over there. There's a lot of new songs and singles from artists that we're producing. Of course, there's some Truck Stop Dave that you guys know well from the show already. So we'll check that all out. And check out our TeePublic, the Ransom Letter Publishing TeePublic, for all your Midnight in Kentucky merch, T-shirts, hats, masks, notebooks, whatever you want. It's there. We appreciate it. In addition, we are deep in the throes of investigating the Kentucky Dogman, the Kentucky Werewolf, whatever you want to call it. And we need as many of you guys that have had experiences or sightings or any type of contact with one of these things. If you would, hit us up on Facebook, hit us up on Twitter, give us an email at midnightinkentuckypodcast@gmail.com. Again, that email is midnightinkentuckypodcast@gmail.com. We want to hear these experiences. We are, like I said, we're deep into an investigation on this thing, and it could end up being a big deal for both Stephen and I and the podcast and you guys as listeners. So hit us up. We want to hear these stories. Any information you have on this Kentucky Dogman, we want to hear it. Regardless of who you are, we want to hear what you've got to say about this thing. But let's get into what we are discussing tonight. We have a very special guest on the show that Stephen and I have wanted to talk to for quite a while. Geraldine Sutton Stith joins us tonight to talk about her family's encounter in Kelly, Hopkinsville, Kentucky on August 21st, 1955. One of the biggest ufological events, period. And without a doubt, probably the biggest paranormal event in Kentucky history. Geraldine is, of course, the daughter of Elmer Lucky Sutton, one of the primary witnesses alongside Billy Ray Taylor and the Sutton family. Stephen and I, of course, as Kentucky residents and researchers of the high strangeness and paranormal in Kentucky, have lived with this story for a long, long time. Stephen, tell us a little bit about, what we're going to be talking about tonight and the story in general.
Yeah, the story in general, what she's going to be talking about is the Kelly Hopkinsville Goblin story, which y'all are probably familiar with. And what happened is back in August of 1955, this family was in a farmhouse in very remote Kentucky in a community called Kelly, Kentucky. And they were, just in a sense, they were being harassed by these 3-foot tall goblins. And they actually had, were shooting guns at them, was unable to kill them. And, they did run them off. But, they went through a night of where these beings, these entities were, kind of terrorizing them through the entire night. And it's probably the most well-documented encounter that there is, as far as, that's not an abduction story. That's an actual encounter where someone is fighting these beings off, when they're physically moving around on their property.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Of course, Astonishing Legends did a 3-parter on this, and it's if you're looking for a podcast that goes into the nuts and bolts of this, I can't recommend that enough. I'll put it in the show notes. But they talk about how this is a classic case of close encounters of the third kind, and how it's one of the rare instances, like you said, where it's a close encounter of the third kind that's not an abduction. This is literally an attack on a farmhouse by these beings, by these little goblin entities that the family describes. Originally, I was gonna, kind of tell the story more in depth and get pretty into it, but as you guys will hear, Geraldine is a phenomenal storyteller. Has of course, a deep familiarity with the story, and she tells it better than I ever could. So we're gonna let her tell that story. We get into not only her family story, but her thoughts on many different things, on the Hellier connection to Kelly Hopkinsville, of course, the Goblin connection, and she kind of goes in depth on that a little bit, and on the caves. And before we went on the air, you mentioned some thoughts that you had about the caves and on all that when we were talking to her.
Yeah. When we were speaking with her, we was talking about the cave that runs over Kentucky. And Kentucky is, pretty much in the United States. It's kind of like, the cave capital. We have Mammoth Cave. We have the caves that we've discussed over here and close to our area in the Somerset, the Sloan's Valley Cave System. And, one thing she mentioned while we were talking with her is that when they could get these beings to run off and go and hide, it wasn't by shooting a gun at them. That seemed to not even faze them, but they would shine a light, like a flashlight, in their eyes, and that seemed to bother them. And then talking about, these beings in the cave, caves are dark, so it's obvious from her stories these beings do not like light, and they're not really ever spotted during the daytime. And, it seems like maybe the caves are somewhere where they would live, because it's dark down there all the time, and maybe they have some type of vision that, is not like our vision as humans, but maybe they only can see in the dark. Maybe where they come from, or where they, originate from, whatever a dimension or another planet that, they don't have light like we do on this planet. And maybe the caves are where they would hide.
Absolutely. And, it's just interesting because, like we talk about in here, there's so many legends of these little beings in Kentucky that go beyond the incident in 1955. But, I don't think people connect those a lot. And I don't think, and of course, the Kelly Hopkinsville event is by far the most infamous event of these little people in Kentucky. But there's so many instances of these creatures here. So, just like there's instances of so many other creatures in Kentucky. But this is an excellent conversation that we have with Geraldine, and we get into so much beyond even, into areas about, why there seems to be this aversion and almost anger and fear toward the paranormal by certain people, and how they want these things put into little boxes for them and stuff.
Right, yeah, and I really enjoyed the conversation that we did have with her that was outside of the Kelly Hopkinsville incident. that, we kind of stirred off into, lots of other things that it's kind of in the realm of what we've talked about in this podcast in the past, and it really, fit well into what we were, discussing.
Absolutely. And it kind of shows the meta conversation around this whole thing of, what is it about some of us that we dig into this stuff and we love it and we want more of it, and it shows us how big and strange the world is. And then there's others of us that are terrified of it and almost get angry about it and don't want to hear about it because it's nonsense. And I think one of my favorite parts of the conversation is what Geraldine said at the very beginning. It's to paraphrase, it's a little bit of strangeness to bring us together in these hard times. And I think that's why there's certain people of us that really love these things and really dig into these things. It's comfort. Strangeness is a weird kind of comfort for some of us. And then others can't fathom it,
Right. And I think a lot of people, maybe don't want to question the beliefs they've had all their life. And I think that's a lot to do with it. And especially in the area of where we live, in the country, there's a lot of the attitudes that, this is the way, I've believed all my life, and there's no thinking outside that box. There's no questioning, my belief system, and anything outside of that, I'm just going to write it off as, some other explanation, or if it can't be explained, I'm just going to say, it's kind of like in The Simpsons when they question, the creators of the Xena cartoon, well, it's a wizard did it. So that's kind of what, in this case, it's the devil did it. It's kind of like, though saying, the devil hid the dinosaur bones here.
Sure, absolutely. And even to this day, I thought, well, we'll get into that in a minute or two after we have the interview, because there definitely is something there about the devil and that side of things. But of course, we are recording this on Sunday, August 16th. That's a Sunday evening. The original event occurred on the Sunday evening, as we talk about in the introduction to the interview here with Geraldine. But with any luck, you are hearing this on its release date of August 21st, this coming Friday. And, of course, that is the 65th anniversary of the Kelly Hopkinsville event. So no matter where you are, whether you are listening to us driving down an old Kentucky back road with cornfields on both sides, or whether you are in an apartment in Louisville surrounded by a city, or whether you're outside of Kentucky, take just a second while you're listening to this interview to go outside and look up at the sky and see if you can feel some of those vibes that Billy Ray felt walking out to the well that August evening. Without further ado, this is Midnight in Kentucky with Geraldine Sutton Stith. Thank you guys so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here with Geraldine Sutton Stith, granddaughter of Lucky Sutton. Granddaughter? Daughter? I'm sorry.
Daughter.
Wow. Well, I mean, there you go. That's a compliment to your age, right there.
A daughter, yeah.
Daughter of Lucky Sutton, one of the experiencers of one of the seminal ufological events, not only in UFOs and alien research, but in Kentucky paranormal and high strangeness. We are recording this episode on Sunday, August 16th. And we're hoping to release it on Friday the 21st, the 65th anniversary of the Kelly Hopkinsville incident. And, of course, the original incident occurred on a Sunday evening. And as I'm sitting here looking out my back window and the sun's going down over these cornfields, you know, you can definitely get the vibe of what happened all those years ago, Geraldine. So if you would you tell us just a little bit about your lineage and your family story and what exactly happened in August of '55?
Well, I'll be glad to, and I want to thank you for having me. It's a thrill to get to do this. I just, you know, like I say, it's a good day when you can talk about the green men, and so
Absolutely.
We need a little something different right now with everything that's going on. So yes,
for sure.
In the house that night, there were 11 people. Almost every one of them I was related to. There was my grandmother, Miss Glennie. Then you had my Uncle J.C. and Aunt Eileen. And you had my two younger uncles, who were Lonnie and Charlton, who were 12 and 10, and my Aunt Mary, who was 7 at the time. Also, O.P. Baker was there, which was my Aunt Eileen's uncle. Now, you throw in my dad, his wife, whom he was married to at the time, Vera, and then you got their friends, Billy Ray Taylor and June, who at the time were stationed in Evansville with a carnival. They were so close, they decided to come in to see, you know, well, my grandmother, which is my dad's mom, and get some home cooking and see the rest of the family, catch up, just to get away from the carnival stuff for a while, because it was hard, tiring, monotonous work. And they were only a couple hours away. So they came in, I believe, on a Friday evening, and Sunday evening is when the incident occurred. And this is what happened. Like I said, it was Sunday evening. They were, you know, this was going to be their last night there for my dad and them, and so they decided, you know, let's just have a nice quiet evening because tomorrow's going to be hectic. And so they were sitting around playing cards. The kids were talking among themselves, and my grandmother and the kids had actually went to church that evening, and she had gotten back. And so Billy Ray decides to go out to the well to get water, and the sun was just going down. And as he was out there, they didn't have indoor plumbing, so, you know, they had to go out to the well to get whatever water they needed. And
right.
So he was out there, and as he was out there, he heard something, you know, in the sky. He looked up, and lo and behold, there was this oval object, silver in color, with the colors of the rainbow flowing behind it, as he described it. Didn't know what it was, ran in the house, told everybody he just saw something that he didn't know what it was. The first thing everybody thought was Billy Ray, being the little jokester he was, he went out there, concocted this story to scare the girls. Because these were all young people. You know, they were in their early 20s. Billy Ray's wife was only like 18 or 19. And so, you know, they just told him, you know, you just saw a shooting star, and he's telling them, no, I know what that looks like. Well, maybe it was a meteor shower, because my grandmother said that there had been meteor showers that month, you know, just like we're having now. And he says, no, I know what those look like. And they says, well, it's, you know, just settle down. There's nothing out there. And he kept on. So my dad told him, well, let's go back out there. Let's see where you saw this at, and just tell me again. So they walked out to the well. He pointed toward the sky, told him again what he had saw. My dad tried to reason with him again with all the things they had said in the house, and Billy Ray's very adamant about, no, I know what all those are. It wasn't none of those. My dad tells him, well, listen, there's nothing out here now. Let's go back in the house, enjoy the rest of our evening. So as they're heading back to the house, lo and behold, from the back where the woods were, comes this little 3.5 foot tall being. It had a huge head, big glowing eyes, huge ears, arms almost touching the ground, and it seemed to be floating on top of the ground. Its legs weren't moving. Right, of course, they didn't know what this was. None of us would. So they both go running in the house, slam the door behind them. My dad tells them there is something out here. The first thing they're all thinking is, all right, Billy Ray done got lucky out there. That was my dad's nickname, Lucky. His real name was Elmer, but they called him Lucky. Done got him out there to go along with this little, scary story. And my grandmother told him, says, you two need to settle down because I have got to get these kids to bed, and you're scaring them. And they kept on. They wouldn't stop. Finally, one got, grabbed a shotgun. One grabbed the rifle. One went to the back door. One went to the front. Well, my grandmother thought, okay, here, there is something going on. So she decides to go to where Billy Ray is, which is at the back door. She goes out there, squats down beside him against the house, and says, Billy Ray, what did you see? And he said, Miss Glennie, I don't know what it was, but I hope it's something that you never have to see. So they sat there, and it got quiet, and they could hear, the talking in the house and carrying on. And it wasn't long, lo and behold, around the corner of the house from where they sat came this little being. The very thing they described when they had run in the house. My grandmother screams, falls to the floor. Everybody comes running, and she tells them, yes, they're telling the truth. There is something out here. About that time, a shot rings out in the front of the house. They go running in. My Uncle J.C. shot one through the window. Well, Billy Ray goes running out the front door, and there's this little stoop over the door, and this clawed hand comes down like it's trying to grab his hair. My Aunt Eileen grabs him, yanks him back in the house. My dad runs out the door, points toward where this arm came from, and there it is. He shoots it, of course, hits it. It rolls, floats away. And somebody screams, there's one in the tree, because they had these huge maple trees.
Right,
Turns around. There it is, sitting on one of the big limbs. He shoots it. It just floats to the ground, rolls, goes away. Well, they're in the house. They're trying to keep them out because they seem like they're wanting to come in. By the time it's all over with, they've shot one off the back fence. They've shot them all around the house. They don't know what to do. They keep coming back. They know they're hitting them. These are country boys that could shoot just practically by the time they could walk. So they knew they were hitting these things.
Right. Was it during this that Billy Ray's hair was pulled, or was that later on in the evening?
No, that was when he walked out the front door, when the hand came down.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's when, they tried to grab his hair.
Right.
And Aunt Eileen grabbed him in, pulled him in. But, so they don't know what to do. They're not killing these things. They keep coming back. My dad tells them just try to calm down because, we'll just run to Hopkinsville and get help. Hopkinsville's just up the road, about 7 miles. We'll go get help. The kids are crying. June's about to lose it. Don't know what to do. It gets quiet, and lo and behold, they hear one going across the metal roof. They hear its little nail. Well, this really sends everybody into hysterics. June's really about to lose it. Kids are crying. My dad tries to settle them down again. So it gets quiet once again, and finally, there's nothing coming up to the doors and windows, so he tells them, let's go. Get out there to the trucks. So they hit the trucks, head into Hopkinsville. Of course, they're terrified the whole way, looking back to see if anything's following them.
Of course.
Get to Hopkinsville. Of course, this is 1955. They've got one little night officer on duty. Here you got 11 people from the age of 50 to 7, running into the station in the middle of the night. All of them trying to tell this little officer what just happened. He's trying to understand it, and he's like, "You've got men attacking your house?" And my dad's trying to explain to him, "No, you're not understanding what we're telling you." So he tells him, he says, just calm down, I'll call the chief. So he calls Chief Russell Greenwell, tells him what's going on. Greenwell tells him, said, "Just keep them there. Just go ahead and call Fort Campbell," which Fort Campbell Army Base was just up the road from Hopkinsville.
Right.
He told him, to call Fort Campbell. He said, "Call the paper. Everybody, just, get everybody here you can, and we're going out to Kelly." So here everybody gets there. You've got this little caravan of vehicles going out to little bitty Kelly in the middle of the night. Of course, it's pitch black dark. There's no such thing as security lights out in the country this, 1955. They pull up. It's eerie feeling. They can feel something has happened here. Clear evidence something did happen, because you've got shotgun and rifle shells all over the ground outside. The same thing inside the house. Holes through the screens, woodwork shot up. When they were all pulling up, some of the officers in one of the cars saw a glowing substance on the back fence. So they went to the back fence to check it out, and as they walked up to it, the glow would disappear. But when they'd walk away from it, it would glow again. So they couldn't understand what that was, but they couldn't find anything. So the chief told my grandmother, Miss Glennie, "I'm so sorry, but there's nothing here. Evidence something happened, but there's nothing here. There's no bodies. There's no blood. There's nothing here." He says, "I can't help you." So they all left. My grandmother tried to get everybody settled down. She got the kids back in bed. She finally laid down. My dad sat beside her in the rocking chair with the shotgun across his lap, because they were still scared. They were mentally and physically exhausted. Didn't know what this was. Didn't know if they were going to come back.
Right.
And my grandmother's laying there in bed. She opens her eyes, and she sees one in the window again. Well, she's thinking, "I'm just tired." So she closes her eyes, opens them up again, and the thing is still there. Well, the third time she does it, she screams at my dad, "They're back." So they start shooting again, and this continues on until daylight, until the sun comes up. And the only thing they can figure that saved them was the sun, because they did notice if they turned a light on or they shined a light toward them in any way, they would back off. And so the only thing they could figure is their eyes were so big they couldn't take the light. So my dad got them all together, set them down, and told them, said, "Listen, no good can come of this." He says, "I heard them last night. They were laughing at us. They don't believe this. So just let it go. Don't say no more about it. Just try to go on." So that's what they tried to do, but that wasn't going to happen because people were coming from everywhere wanting to talk to them. Camping out in the yard because they wanted to see the little beings. They thought they'd come back. People were taking souvenirs. They were walking through the house, picking stuff up out of the yard. I mean, it was just total, like a circus. They didn't know what they were going to do. My grandmother was scared because, my dad and Billy Ray and the girls were having to go back to work. So she was going to be left there with just Uncle J.C. and Aunt Eileen and the kids. And she was scared. She, if they came back, would they be able to, ward them off and keep them, away?
Sure, yeah.
So she sold the farm within 2 weeks and moved into Hopkinsville into an apartment. So did J.C. and Eileen. So she got out of there because she figured moving into an apartment complex, there was safety in numbers. She was around more people.
Right.
And
well, that to me, I have heard this story many times and read it in many different sources, and that was the best I have ever heard it. That was a compelling version of that story. But I guess you come by it honestly.
Well, thank you. Well, I've told it enough. I should know it pretty well. But,
Sure. But that, I actually had somehow missed that she had sold the farm within 2 weeks of this incident over many years, until I heard you tell the story at Crypticon, and that is a testament to how terrified they were of what happened to them. I mean,
exactly.
You know, you don't just sell your farm in 2 weeks and move into an apartment in the city unless something has happened.
Exactly.
Right.
And the people she sold it to were family, and
sure.
The kids, they were terrified. They didn't want to move into that house, but they had to. You know, a lot of the people around there were terrified. I mean, my mom just happened to live there. She's, you know, down in the valley. She stayed there in Kelly with her first husband. And she said people were scared. People that lived around there were really scared. You know, people just didn't understand what this did to everyone around there.
Of course. And I mean, it would, something like this. But before this incident, there had been several happenstances of even some sheriff's deputies sighting flying saucers in the area, hadn't there?
Well, during that day, several people had seen lights and sounds that they couldn't explain. And even during the night that night, there was a light that had been seen. It started over toward Clarksville, which is on the other side of Fort Campbell. I guess it'd be north.
Right.
And it came across Clarksville. It came across Fort Campbell. It hit Hopkinsville, and it hit Kelly. You know. And so there was this light that had been seen going across the sky that night by several people, some soldiers, some officers that came forward later and told this. You know.
And you know, to me that and I'm sure Stephen can see this too, with as much as we do research into both these events. That almost sounds like in '67 with the Mothman incident, or you know, that string of sightings in West Virginia. Before that all started, there were this string of UFO sightings, much like this string of UFO sightings.
Right.
Here.
Well, you know, I think people back then were probably a little like they are today. You live close to an army base, and the first thing you're going to think, you're going to put it off as them doing something, especially today.
Absolutely.
Especially today, because there's so much experimentation and stuff going on with new stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably a little bit how it was back then, because, you know, it's easier that way. It's easier to say that's what that was.
Oh, absolutely.
Instead of something from another world, or it was,
absolutely,
you know, paranormal or whatever it could have been. You know, it's easier just to say, hey, that was Fort Campbell doing some kind of maneuver.
Right. Oh, and it absolutely. Me and Stephen had that conversation many times. You know, it's people in general, I think, and you know, not everybody, of course, and hopefully not a lot of our listeners, but I think people like to have boxes that they can conveniently put things in and say, this is the answer to that. And when you take those things out of those boxes and say, well, this doesn't really fit, you know, I don't know, sometimes people get angry. Sometimes people get upset that you take those things out of those boxes for them. So, well,
that's true, yeah. And, you know, I don't know. People just don't want to believe either. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You are 100% correct. 100%.
You know, people want to believe that we're it, and that's nothing else is out here.
Yes. And you know, that's one of those convenient answers, isn't it? That's one of those things where you can say, well, we're the only thing, that's it, case closed, convenient answer, I don't have to worry about it anymore.
Exactly.
But once you start digging into these things, it becomes kind of obvious that we're not the only things out there. And not only are we not the only things out there, we may not be the smartest things out there.
You ain't kidding.
Well, Geraldine, your grandmother's character, Glennie, am I correct?
Yes, Glennie.
Your grandmother?
Glennie.
The more I read about her and listen about her, her character fascinates me because, from what I can tell, she was just a very practical, matter-of-fact woman from the descriptions I've read of her. Did you get the chance to meet her before? While you were alive?
Oh, yeah. Before she passed, I mean, we used to go to their house. She used to come to ours all the time, and yeah, she was just a sweet, sweet little old lady. You know, was very God-fearing. I mean, she'd get mad at my dad for some of the things he would do because she didn't think they were, you know, up to par with the good Lord above. And, you know, that's just how she was. You know, I like to tell people this woman, she would not tell a lie if you tried to cut her arm off, you know, and that's another reason why this story is so credible and why Chief Greenwell just, you know, stood by my family through this, because he knew her. He knew she wouldn't lie about the situation. He knew something happened that night. You know, we can't prove or disprove whatever these things were, but the fact remains, it will always remain, something was there that night.
Absolutely, absolutely. Was it Chief Greenwell who said, "If Glennie saw it, then I believe it"? Or that quote, I love that quote, and I mean that says so much about her character, you know.
Exactly, and that's how everybody felt. And, you know, most of the people that lived around there felt the same way. That knew her, they knew, you know, that she wasn't the type to lie or make up some crazy story. Why? And another thing too that you got to understand: this is 1955. The alien stuff was just starting, you know, as far as movies were concerned. But you got to realize these people, the only thing they had in that house was a radio. They didn't have a TV. The only people that could have even known anything like this would be my dad and Billy Ray and the girls, you know, because of them traveling with Carnival.
Right.
You know, and they wouldn't have done anything like that because my dad was not that type of person. He wouldn't have put himself in that kind of situation to be laughed at because, oh, Lord have mercy, you did not call him a liar or anything like that.
Absolutely.
And,
well, I mean, that's a very Kentuckian story, you know. The family that has these encounters, and you know, in this rural community, that story is told many times over, and this is maybe the first time that story is told. But one of the things that I thought was so interesting that was pointed out on Astonishing Legends when they did their coverage of the story was the fact that I think your dad went to work the next day. So if this was a hoax, you know, why wouldn't he have stayed there to talk to the media? He had to work.
Yeah, he had to work. You know, he had to work.
Right.
Plus, you know, it was like he told them. See, he heard them laughing that night. You know, all the people that were there to help them, he thought, were laughing at them. He even went to, there was a little cafe down the road, and he was good friends with this little boy, Billy Thomas. And Billy was 14 at the time this happened. And he went down there to the cafe, and Billy was there, and he told Billy, he said, you know, people are laughing at us. He says, I just don't understand it. He couldn't understand it because something happened, and nobody would take him serious and listen. So he knew there was nothing that could be done. He didn't want to talk to anybody about it, you know, until the day he died. I mean, right before my daddy got sick, he had some people from Germany contacting him, wanting to talk to him, and even wanting to bring him over to Germany and all this kind of stuff. And he told me, he says, no. Sure. He said, no, I don't want nothing else to do with it. And even the ones that are alive, the three little ones that are still alive today, they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to remember it.
Sure. Right.
You know, and it's just eerie and scary and awful to them.
Right. When did your father pass away, Geraldine?
95.
95. So he had at least lived up until the point where, you know, the alien extraterrestrial UFO thing had kind of blew up in pop culture then.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, at least that was, you know, in a way, some form of recognition of, hey, you know, do you think he ever got that? Do you think he ever realized, hey, you know, other people are seeing these things, other people are
I think he probably did, but he just never talked about it. It's not something he went out purposely to watch or go see.
Right.
Because I think he always had that great fear that they would come back.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because, you know, like I said, they never knew why they were there in the first place or why they picked their house out of all the other houses there in Kelly. Right. You know, they could have easily went to where my mom lived. Here she was with 7 little kids at the time, you know.
Right.
And I don't know what she would have done. Thank God they didn't go there, but...
well, and that's another part of it. I mean, the children that are involved in the story, you know, it's one thing to if this were whatever with adults, but when there's children in it, you know, that's a whole different aspect. That's a whole other thing of having to protect them and having to keep them safe.
Exactly. And see, that was that was in his mind. You know, he had to protect his family. He had his mama there. He had his younger siblings there. He had his wife there.
Right.
You know, and he wasn't going to let anything harm them. You know, my dad was a small man, but he would fight a bear for what was right to him.
Sure,
and, you know, there was no way he was going to let those things in there no matter, you know, if he had had to have given his own life, he would have.
Right.
So, you know.
Well, let me ask you this. When was the first time as a child you remember hearing the story? How did this come into your life?
All right, now, my family did not talk about this, didn't know it existed. I mean, even my older brothers and sisters who were, like I said, were by my mom's first husband, they never talked about this. So we didn't know about it. We found out by chance, and it was either 68 or 69. Now, I was born in 61, so there you go. And you were -6 at the time the incident occurred. It would have been 6 years before your birth. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't born yet. My parents weren't even together yet.
Okay.
And it was I'll never forget it. It was a Sunday afternoon. It was summertime, and my younger siblings and I were sitting there watching Sunday afternoon cartoons, and knock at the door. I answered it because I was the oldest one, and there was this nicely dressed man and woman standing there, and they asked me, you know, if my daddy was home, and I said, yeah, and Mom and Dad were in the back of the house, so I ran back there and got them. You know, they introduced themselves, did all the pleasantries, and finally the man told my dad, said, Mr. Sutton, we want to talk to you about the green men. I thought, what? Green men? And see, I've always loved sci-fi and horror. I mean, even when I was little.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
I loved this stuff. So when they said green men, it just hit me like, what?
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, I guess my mom and dad thought, well, time they learned. So they set us on the floor, and everybody sat down, and my dad started telling this incredible story. Well, this incredible story scared me to death. So when nighttime came that evening, I ran around the house, shutting all the curtains, windows, shades, doors, everything that could be shut, because I was afraid these little beings were going to come look in at us. And that happened for years and years and years and years. Even today, if we're out at night in the yard, I mean, driving around, anything, I keep an eye on the sky. I mean, it's just that terrifying to me after seeing him tell this story. Because he was terrified. You could see he was scared when he was telling this story. Every time, if you got him to tell the story, you could tell it frightened him. And
that's saying something for a kid to see their father scared like that from a story.
Yes. And it was, you know, like I said, you were very lucky if you got him to talk about it at all. And I think he always had the fear that they'd be back. You know, you got to realize they were shooting these things with shotgun and rifles, and they weren't dying. And, you know, in their mind, you shoot somebody with a shotgun or a rifle, they're supposed to die, they're supposed to drop dead.
Right. That's the end of it.
They couldn't do this, and so it scared them. And I think he was scared they'd come back because they didn't get what they wanted the first time.
Right. Right. Well, it's interesting. I had never really, of course, I had considered the fact, they're shooting them, they're floating backwards, they're, whatever. But it's, this case, the Kelly Hopkinsville incident, was so influential on so many things, in pop culture. That could have been the first instance of, that shock and awe of, oh my God, these things aren't dying when we shoot them. That's
exactly.
I never really thought about that like that, but yeah, for sure. Well, I know that you've written 2 separate books on this incident, Alien Legacy and The Kelly Green Men.
Yeah, Joey. I've read the Kentucky, the Kelly Green Man, her recently, and I kind of read through the story, and one thing that stood out to me, you mentioned in the book that out there in the field, there was an impression of maybe where this craft landed, and that impression was there for many years or months afterwards.
Yes. The following weekend, after the man and woman came to visit, the following weekend, my dad took us to Kelly and showed us where it all happened at. I guess he figured, he might as well show us. And so we went out there. The old house was still standing. The well was still there. It's still there now. And he took us way back in the field, and lo and behold, I'll never forget it, there was this huge circular thing on the ground where no grass was growing. It was dead. It was brown.
Gee. So it was still there all those years later, a decade or more.
68, 69, whenever that was.
Wow. Okay.
Sure was. And it's so funny because here a few months ago, I can't tell you who or anything, but we're doing a new TV show for the Travel Channel.
Awesome.
It should be coming up in the next couple of months. And anyway, the host of the show came, and we did all the recording and everything in Kelly. And we were able to get on some of the land because my sister and her husband actually bought 5 acres of land that is actually belonged to my grandmother.
Oh, wow. Is this the farm area there? Yeah, this is the part of the farm. See, the farm was cut up into several different plots. I mean, there's like 5 different families that live on all this now. Each one's got several acres. And anyway, they were able to buy 5 acres of it, and we were able to go way down in the part that the craft, because, I've got that drawing that Isabel Davis did. Now, yeah.
I'm talking about. And we were able to take that and actually figure out where the landing spot was, and actually go way down there in the woods, and we think we found the spot. So I got to ask, is the indention still there? No. Well, it was kind of hard. It got so woolly. Me and my sister stayed kind of back, and the host and the camera people kind of went down in there farther. But he's pretty sure he found where it is. Of course, it's been 65 years this year. So, it has finally started growing some, and there are some trees and stuff down in there finally. But it's pretty woolly. I mean, whoever owns that is awesome. It's all grown up. Nobody's done anything to that land back in there, and right. So it just grows and grows and grows. That's awesome that you found the spot, though. Yeah, we're pretty sure we found the spot. So. And that's it's wild. I mean, it's wild enough that was there, a decade. It was still there a decade later after this incident. Oh, I know. Isn't that crazy? That and that just made it just that more real in my little 8-9-year-old head. Sure. Hearing this story and then going down there and seeing it, Yep. Oh, go ahead, Stephen. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just saying, that definitely added some reality to it, that still being there, and it definitely shows that something, caused some serious radiation maybe on the ground at that point. Right.
Well, I know that of course, this is one of the biggest cases in ufology, like I was talking about at the beginning of the show, but it's kind of taken on a whole new twist in the past couple of years with this Hellier documentary from Greg and Dana Newkirk from Planet Weird. And I know that, of course, Steve and I have talked about Hellier relentlessly on this show, because as soon as it came out, the Kentucky Goblins are back. We'd heard about this, our whole lives, and suddenly these things are suddenly reappearing.
Yeah.
And, of course, you were on the first season of Hellier talking to Greg a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit, about what you think about the whole Hellier thing and what's going on there?
Well, back when they first contacted me about this, it's been years, when this first started. And I was like, oh, my goodness. And I even met Greg out at Kelly.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah. And, because his thing is, are there caves in Kelly? Could this possibly be a link to the ones?
Right.
And I'm telling him, yeah, I think so, because Kentucky is nothing but caves.
Oh, absolutely. The Mammoth Cave system is one of the longest in the world.
Exactly. There are caves we'll never venture. We'll never find out, anything about.
Right.
Never, ever, ever. Not in our lifetime.
Right.
So, yeah, can there be, systems following all through underneath here that maybe, just maybe some got left, maybe some came back and got left? Did they crash and get left? Did something happen and they took to the caves?
Right.
And after all these years, could they have changed from living in the caves? Well, sure, I think so. Anything's possible.
Oh, yeah.
And it's eerie. It's eerie. Hey, you're talking Eastern Kentucky. Have you ever been up in Eastern Kentucky? You know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
It is eerie up in there.
I tell you, there was a time I play music as well, and I had a drummer that lived up in there, and he had to go home after a show one night, and we drove the 4+ hours. We're based in Russell Springs, so we're about 4 hours away from Hopkinsville. And we just so happened to break down right there as you're going into Hopkinsville. And years of this stuff was flooding through my mind as we were getting out to find out what's going through the car and, jumping at every little thing. So it is. There's a very eerie vibe just at nighttime up there. It's got the X-Files, Twin Peaks, type aura going around.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
Well, I'll tell you, back when I used to go to this little church, went there forever, and when I was a teenager, right during high school, every summer we'd go up to Eastern Kentucky and do vacation Bible school.
Sure, yeah.
And we would stay at the college. We'd stay at Cumberland College, and every day we would have to take a 2-hour ride up into the mountains of Eastern Kentucky. And the people at the college told us, don't ever try to go up there at night. Stay around here. Told us some stuff that happened and went on and, all this kind of stuff. And it was like, oh, my gosh, are they just doing this to us to make sure we stay here? Or is it really? Does really all this stuff happen up in the mountains and hills? So it was an eerie thing, but we'd go up there every summer and do vacation Bible school, and the men would go out and build houses, and we enjoyed it. We loved it. But, yeah, it was kind of eerie because they'd tell us, do not go up in them hills at night.
Sure. And, that's the other thing about it. And we said that, back when we were talking about Somerset, because we live about an hour from Somerset, which, of course, was a huge part of the second season in Hellier. Mm-hmm. And it's got a very similar vibe. It's, it's eerie, it's weird, it's kind of creepy. But on the other side, it's really a beautiful place. And there's a lot of great things happening. And it's the same with Hopkinsville. And Kelly, it's a beautiful place, and it's those mixtures of the two that kind of makes it what it is,
The stories, the things that have happened.
Absolutely.
It is. It's scary.
Absolutely. But that kind of brings me to another question. I was going to ask you this later, but we're kind of already in that territory. Of course, Eastern Kentucky also has a lot of Sasquatch sightings, has a lot of I think there's the Kentucky hellhounds, the large dog creatures up in eastern Kentucky. Have you ever experienced anything other than this incident that would, that's of high strangeness or paranormal or anything?
Oh gosh. Well, yeah, we did have a little incident happen to us when we lived.
Interesting.
Out in the country before we moved where we are now. We've lived in our home here a little over, about 2.5 years now. And we actually live in a little subdivision in Brandenburg, so
Okay, yeah.
But we lived in Princeton before, down toward, Lake Barkley, Paducah, that area.
Right, yeah.
And we had a small farm, and we didn't have really close neighbors except for one who lived up on the hill from us, but we couldn't, see them or, they were there, but in the summer when the trees were all out, you couldn't see or hear anybody. So, it was kind of eerie at night there. It was kind of eerie. And we had this little girl stay with us that was a friend, and she was supposed to be, now, I don't know if you believe in it, but a psychic.
Oh, and, yeah.
Okay. Well, we had a shop at one time, and that's what we did. We sold unusual things, and we sold, the basic.
Oh, that's awesome.
Things
that's
that
really
people
cool.
needed, stones and rocks and sage and all this stuff and incense. And we actually had her, and we had 2 other people, and tarot reader. And
this is really cool. Are you guys still doing this?
No, we sold the shop, moved up here.
That sounds awesome.
We loved it, but where we were, it just...
I understand, yeah.
It was bad. I could go into a lot there, too, but anyway, we're lucky, and we were able to sell it, but...
Absolutely.
Anyway, we had this little girl stay with us, and we had her in the guest room, and the next morning... she come to us, and she told us, she said, I got to tell you something. She said, I had an Indian come and visit me in the room last night. And I'm like, okay. And she said he wouldn't go away, so she said I started following him. He took me to the dining room. Now, the dining room in this house had these 3 huge, monstrous windows. This house had the biggest windows I've ever lived in.
Right.
And we didn't cover them up. Of course, I had stuff on them to make them pretty, but we lived out in the country. Nobody was out there. Nobody could see us. And, I'd gotten pretty well over my fear of, aliens looking in at me, so it didn't bother me. So anyway, she said it took her there, and she looked out the big windows out into the backyard and said there was about 50 other Indians out there.
Oh, wow.
So I'm like, okay. She said, I don't know what they wanted. So we got to the shop that day, and I told my other 2 people, the tarot reader and the other girl who was kind of a medium. And he says, let me do something. So he went and did his mojo with the tarot cards and all that stuff.
Sure, yeah.
He says, what we need to do is we need to go out there and we need to look around on your land. I'm like, all righty, just come on out there. So they went out there, looked around, and they said, something's happened on this land. And I said, what do you mean? He said, there's been a fire. The land is upset. He said, this has got the Indians upset. The land is upset. And he said, something's happened on here. He says, what we need to do is we need to do a little ritual, bless it, and try to get it to settle back down. So I said, okay.
Sure.
A few days later, they came back, and they had all their stuff with them, and I went out there with them. And they set everything up, did their blessings, and all this saging, smudging, and all this stuff, even gave blood. And I'm like, oh, my goodness. Sure. Even had me pray. So we were praying and doing all this stuff. And so we got done, and he says, I think you're going to be okay now. And I'm like, okay. And so sure enough, nothing else happened. And lo and behold, it wasn't, I don't know, it was a week later that I found out that the Trail of Tears had been through on that land.
Oh, wow.
Now, you know what the Trail of Tears is, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course.
Yeah. The Trail of Tears that went in on that land, there's no telling what happened. They probably had a fire there.
Sure.
There was something eerie on the land that we never figured out what it was because we was afraid to, but there were these big mounds back in there on it. And we just thought, leave it alone. We never did bother those mounds. I don't know what the people, live there now think about it, but...
Well, Stephen and I have actually done quite a bit of research into those mounds, and it's odd how much supernatural and paranormal happenings happen around those mounds, and we have so many of those in Kentucky. That's very, very interesting that you guys had mounds on the property with those. That's wild.
Yeah, it was kind of eerie. When we first walked the land before we bought it and seen those, we were like, oh, okay, what are these?
Right, yeah.
And there's even, have you seen the trees that they have made them grow and they've made the trunk of it come out like into a bench? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. There's even one of those back in there.
Oh, wow. So this area had a long history of energy buildup and wild things that had happened on it. Sure.
Exactly.
Sure. And even to that, the Native Americans always called Kentucky the dark and bloody ground for just the things that happened here anyway. And I've always thought that was, an interesting side of Kentucky about, just the fact that even back then, they knew that this place was haunted with a variety of wild stuff.
Oh, yeah. Even back, I don't remember how far back, but before we got here, the Cherokee were chasing off this little being that would bother them, and they would have like little riots, I guess you call them riots and stuff with them, because they were trying to run them off the land, and the Indians wanted their land, but these little beings didn't want them on the land, and so they had a lot of trouble with these little beings.
Are those the Pukwudgies? Am I thinking? Is that the?
No, I don't know what they were called.
But that goes. There's the Cherokee legends, and then there's the legends of the people in Canada, and I mean, there's all kinds of legends of these little creatures that are wanting, that have interactions with the tribes and things.
Now, there's just no telling.
Oh,
no
absolutely.
telling.
It's. You mentioned just briefly, and of course, don't say anything you don't want to, but I am interested on your take in it. About how when you own the shop there was kind of a backlash or whatever. What do you think it is that people have such a prejudice or a negative view of these things? Why is it that it makes people, some people are just
uneasy,
upset?
Yeah, I don't know.
Why do you think that is?
I never got it because our little shop wasn't a bad shop. We just helped people. I mean, the girl we had there did, what's it called, reflexology, where she did the feet thing. I mean, she helped a lot of people.
Absolutely.
A lot of people. We did those foot soaks, detoxings, and, I don't know. I never got it just because we sold tarot cards and a few other things like that,
and stones and sage. And,
exactly. It was like we were witches or something.
Right.
We were witches.
Well,
we were just,
yeah, sure.
Trying to do something different.
Right. And offering people help in a different way, And so many people think, well, this is against science or modern medicine or whatever, but it's not. It's just, it's help in another way. Like there can be more than one thing, guys.
Well, the thing is, people have been doing things with stones and sage and incense and herbs and all this stuff for ages.
Absolutely.
And we did that. We sold teas and vitamin things and all that kind of stuff that was good for you.
Right.
And it was just that's just how this part of the country works. I mean,
for sure. I do very, very limited tarot. I'm learning as I go, but tarot has helped me understand so much about myself and about the world, and not even looking at it from a mystical point of view, just looking at it from pulling, from your subconscious, and it's helped me understand so much. And I think if the critics saw that and they understood exactly what it is, maybe there wouldn't be that negative thing. But I don't really think these people even want to see that sometimes.
Right.
Well, let me ask you this: how has this incident, like your family's incident in Kelly, how has that affected Hopkinsville and that area of Eastern Kentucky? How what's the ripples from that event now?
Well, it's getting better now. And this is our 10th anniversary for the festival. We have a festival every year. This would have been our 10th if we'd gotten to have it. Of course, we're not going to get to, but.
Right.
It's gotten better. When we first started, it was kind of rough because a lot of people were like, what? What are you doing this for? We don't need this. And still there's a few people live around there in Kelly that still don't care for it. But the thing is, look what this festival has done for the community.
Absolutely.
They were able to buy 11 acres of land. With these 11 acres of land, they have been able to put a child's playground, and I mean a nice playground, one of the biggest playgrounds in western Kentucky.
Right, sure.
They've able to put in a fire station, which they're still working on. We're able to have this festival there every year. They're going to put in a walking path around the grounds so people have a place to walk. This is what this festival has brought, and people are finally waking up to that and accepting it more. And it's getting better. We're in the process. There's this guy that's going to do a movie. He's actually
I was actually going to ask you about that.
Sure. He's coming next weekend and doing some auditions for some local talent because he's wanting, some local people to be in it. He's already got the main characters, the actors done for them, but it ought to be interesting. But anyway.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, movie shoots are always, I don't think people realize how much goes into those.
Oh, they don't.
It's always a wild experience.
It is.
Top to bottom.
And, oh, my gosh, it's tedious and tiring and
absolutely,
all of that.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. Well, that's awesome. And that was actually my next question. There's been several media interpretations of this. Of course, you wrote 2 books on it. And like you said, there's a movie about to be made, which I'm excited about. I've been kind of following the production thus far. I know that with all the craziness going on in the world right now, like everything got slowed down a little bit. But I'm excited to check that out. And I just kind of wanted to ask you, about the way that this case has been presented in pop culture and media. What are your what's your take on that as the daughter of someone who experienced it?
How do I feel about it?
How do you have they been faithful? Do you think anybody's captured it exactly how it was? Or,
yeah. Well, White Door Productions, the guys that did that one back in 2017, the year of the eclipse.
Okay, yeah.
That one is probably the one. Well, it's down to it. I mean, it's it's it almost word for word.
You were a screenwriter on that, weren't you?
Well, they wanted me to be a part of it, just to be there with them and, make sure that it was done right, which, they did everything pretty well for 2 people that had no budget. I mean, that was a no-budget movie. No budget whatsoever.
That is mine and Steven's tagline, 2 people with no budget. I understand that completely.
Yeah, where the guy that's doing this one, he's got a big budget plan, so he's got it,
awesome.
But he's taking the story and doing it totally different. He is,
right.
The the story is going to be in it, but what he's doing is he's going into their minds and seeing what they're going through that night. The main characters.
That actually sounds pretty amazing.
I like the script. I think it's really good. If he can just pull it off, we'll see.
Right.
But
that sounds awesome.
But yeah, it's going to be going into their minds and their thoughts and what they're going through that night. My dad and my grandmother and, you know, some of the main characters, what they're going through in their brains that night, you know, with all this going on around them. Like my grandmother, she's religious. So she's going to be questioning her religion.
Oh, man, this sounds great.
Yeah, he's out there. So, you know, like I said, if he can pull this off and do it right, it's going to be good.
Right. It almost like a psychological thriller of
yes.
This sounds great. Awesome. Well, Geraldine, we've really enjoyed talking to you.
Geraldine, I appreciate you calling in and talking to us. It's been really nice to hear your story and talking with you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate y'all having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. This was an awesome show. I've got one more question for you. I know that this question's kind of subjective or subjective. Yeah, it's a hard question to answer, but you know, me and Steven so often encounter in these cases, whether it be goblins, UFOs, Sasquatch, dogmen, you know, whatever, the plethora of weird things that happen here in Kentucky. You know, we find that a lot of it is kind of tied together, that none of it is really independent. You know, and it may be a loose thread sometimes. It may be, you know, just a couple scraps of evidence or whatever. You know, and of course, there's researchers who think maybe these things are interdimensional or, you know, extra-dimensional, somewhere completely removed from our reality. And of course, there's the extraterrestrial hypothesis of you know, aliens from another planet. There's as many theories as there are cases where something weird has happened.
Right.
But I was just wondering, what's your take on that? What do you think that your family saw back in 1955 in Kelly, and kind of what do you think it is in your best summation of these?
Okay. I believe simply because people were seeing lights that night. People were seeing lights and sounds during the day that day. And because of all this and because of what Billy Ray's seen at the well, I have to say they were extraterrestrial.
Sure.
I don't think they were anything paranormal as far as goblins or something like my grandmother thought the devil had brought forth. I think they were
Absolutely.
aliens. And did she think they were demonic? Did she think they were more demonic in origin? And she always believed that, or was she ever convinced that they were extraterrestrial? As far as I know, she thought that. Now, I don't know if anybody had ever changed her mind about that or not, because she was religious. She
Absolutely,
had come
and that
from
was
church,
her perspective. Yeah.
You know, and that was exactly her thought, because she knew nothing about alien existence, you know, other life forms, you know, except for God and the angels and, you know, that type of beings, not something from another planet.
Right.
You know,
right.
So
Absolutely.
That's why she believed they were something the devil had brought forth.
Right. Well, you know, on that note, I loved how you opened, I believe it was Alien Legacy with the, from Ezekiel there, from the layout from, that was awesome. And, you know, of course, this may be a little heretical, but that's always been one of my favorite verses of the Bible, just because it talks about Ezekiel's encounter with something very similar to what many people have talked about, you know. So I love that. That was,
we don't know. You know, you watch these TV shows and read about it all the time. You know, see the drawings on the walls. You know, they had something back in biblical times. I think they've even seen cavemen writings on the walls where something was. Yeah. You know, they had seen something. So they've been here ever since. Absolutely. You know, they were here before we were. If people would just wake up and realize that.
And, you know, I'm not sure, you know, we've come so far with the Department of Defense saying, you know, these things are real, and, you know, even going so far as saying that we may crash into one day. But I'm not sure that we will ever fully have answers about exactly what it is. And
Probably
you know,
not in our
even
lifetime.
right, even though, you know, it's like you said, it's the human experience to see these things. I mean, it's been their whole history of seeing things like this.
Yep, I agree.
Well, Geraldine, thank you so much. Tell everybody where they can find you, where they can find your books. I know that you do a little Etsy shop as well.
Yes.
That has some really cool merchandise in it. So tell us where we can find that stuff.
Yeah, I do have my website, which is alienlegacy1955.com, but I think my son does my website, so I think he's fixing it where everything can be switched over to my Etsy shop. And if you go to the Etsy page, all you have to do is type in aliens and goblins, all lowercase, all squashed together, and my shop will pop up. And speaking of something like that, I'm going to have a kid's book here not too long. If my illustrator ever gets with it and gets done, she's almost done with it. And it's going to be about the alien, the Kelly encounter, in kids' form.
Oh, man, that sounds awesome. Me and my son will read this literally every day.
It's going to be cute. It's going to be cute.
That sounds awesome. I saw on your Facebook also where I think your brother is doing those awesome little goblin stuff.
Yes. I got to go pick up some tomorrow. He's having a hard time. He's got so much going on right now. I'm not getting them quick. But
I understand.
Going to get a few tomorrow, and I'm trying to create a new one, especially for Halloween. We're trying to fix a skeleton one.
That sounds awesome. I mean, as far as that goes, I'm definitely going to pick up the old school goblin, and if you get the skeleton ones going, I definitely want one of those too. So, and those are awesome. Like when I saw those, I was like, geez, that has to be on my computer desk at some point.
He does a really good job, really good.
Those
People are loving them. They're really well made.
Yeah. I mean, like literally looks like he took it, you know, right from the books of the diagrams of them. Yeah, amazing. Yep. Well, Geraldine, thank you so much. This conversation has been awesome. Been wanting to have it for a long time, so we appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
For sure. And I guess we will be right back with Midnight in Kentucky. Thank you guys so much. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Midnight in Kentucky. What you have just heard is Midnight in Kentucky in conversation with Geraldine Sutton Stith, daughter of Elmer Lucky Sutton, experiencer of the Kelly Hopkinsville event in Kelly, Kentucky on August 21st, 1955, one of the seminal UFO events in history of the subject. So, Stephen, what did you think about that conversation? There was a lot there. Not only was there talk of goblins and UFOs and aliens, but there was talk of paranormal in all sense and just a lot of good stuff. What did you think, man?
Man, it was a great interview, and I really appreciate Geraldine coming on to the podcast and talking with us. But yeah, we went beyond, the story, and she told it very well. And, I've been reading her book, the Kelly Green Men, and I recommend everybody to go out and buy her book and read the story for yourself. And the book not only has the story about the incident that happened in Kelly, but it also has other events that happened around Kentucky and other parts of the United States that, Geraldine has discussed with other people, and she's put these stories into her book. And, yeah, we went everywhere from, beyond the Kelly incident. We went to, talking about the incident over here in Hellier and Somerset. We even talked about, mediums, psychics, Indian mounds, the whole 9 yards. And it was great. It was, it kind of sums up our podcast in general, things we've discussed in the past.
Absolutely. It was a pretty great conversation with Geraldine. One of my favorite parts of it, though, was when we were talking about her grandmother, and right there at the end, and she said that her grandmother, that to her knowledge, she never stopped thinking that these things were of the devil. And, that kind of goes to a lot that you and I talk about on here about, different way that these beings are perceived. And I've got this really interesting theory that I'm probably going to do a blog post on, and maybe even a special episode on, because it's an elaborate theory. It's a wild theory, but I'm kind of getting more fond of it as I scratch it out. It's interesting the different ways that these beings are perceived, whether it be extraterrestrial, cave goblins, or demons. When Geraldine was talking about that, she was talking about her grandmother perceiving them in that light, it reminded me of the ATIB program that, was announced a couple of years ago. And, of course, all of that's blown up in recent days. But how there were members of the Department of Defense that didn't even want to talk about what these things could be or what they were, because they thought they were demonic. And they thought that they were not extraterrestrial, that they were demons, in the sense that they are evil and evil incarnate.
Yeah, I mean, even that thought process of thinking these things are demons, extended from back when this occurred in 1955 all the way up to the current time we're in, where this disclosure is coming out. That is kind of a, an alternate theory, other than these things being from another planet or another dimension, that they are demonic. And, and we can't say definitive there are any of those, but we can't eliminate them either, because we have no proof or evidence that they are not, demons.
Right, absolutely. And, it kind of goes along with Jacques Vallée's theory on these things, and kind of what we discussed when we talked with James Bunch, the episode, or in the outro to the James Bunch episode, our last episode, how these events could be perceived, and we've discussed this a little with Geraldine there in the last little bit, with her introducing Alien Legacy with her book, Alien Legacy, with the scripture from Ezekiel about Ezekiel and the flaming wheels. And how events like this, events where people encounter celestial things like these, could be interpreted as hierophantic events or the celestial coming to Earth. They absolutely are. So there is, regardless of the way you look at it, there is that religious and spiritual slant. And if listeners haven't already figured out, that's kind of my jam. Like, I really dig that aspect of these things, so that's why I always find myself talking about it. But, there definitely is a religious aspect to these things, no matter which way you turn. And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, and there's another book that I just finished up just, a couple of weeks ago, and it kind of goes along that whole, range of what you're discussing there, and Escaping Eden.
Yeah, I'm about halfway through it now. It's an amazing book, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, it just kind of goes through all the theories and everything, of the biblical accounts of these things from the very beginning, and it actually interprets the Bible in a completely different light with, looking at these things we're seeing today, experiencing today, and even what was experienced, back in Kelly in 1955 as, interpretation of the Bible that, if you read it the way this author of the book, who is, by the way, I guess a preacher or maybe a former preacher at this point, describes it, it's like, wow, if you look at it that way, a lot of this starts making sense of what's going on in the world. And I guess another interesting thing I heard this past week, because I wasn't aware of this, and maybe our listeners are aware of this also, but the inventor of the Xerox machine, how he come up with that idea is he had a medium. Like, I guess he was kind of like a person that worked as a medium a lot, kind of in the era. And the idea for the Xerox and how it should function and how it should be, engineered, come through a medium. And a medium says like a entity or a spirit, translated that to this medium, and then the medium gave it to the engineer of Xerox, and he created the Xerox machine. And then from there on, and a lot of the computer things we have today of technology, even, as far as like the operating system and the mouse and things, come from Xerox. That was kind of the originator of some of these things we have. Not the inventor of them, but a lot of the ideas come from that. And, Ben, you and I have talked about this a lot, where I think it was Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard and Lester Crowley was out in the desert and, it opened portals. And since then, we've had kind of this technology boom since, back in that day. And even, I think, was it American Cosmic touched on that a little bit?
Oh, American Cosmic, I mean, to me, that's what American Cosmic is about. It's about Tyler and how he's receiving messages from these entities and to develop these things. And I mean, dude, you're absolutely right. And that's a whole thing handed down through history, how these entities have contacted us and explained how to develop this type of technology or something. And the whole, I believe it was Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard who were trying to mimic Aleister Crowley's ritual, the Babylon ritual out in the desert that, supposedly opened this portal in 47 and released whatever they released. And, gave us this technology. And, of course, we may mention this on the James Bunch episode. We mentioned this on one episode. And it may have been the Octavia Hatcher episode. It may have been that long ago. How, there was this medium, and I can't remember their name. I should really do better research before I go off like this. But there was this medium, and they had contacted some type of entity, and they were discussing technology. And the entity said, "Oh, no, we have always been here. We're just waiting for your technology to get better so you can perceive us." So, I mean, what if all of these entities are, have a hand in developing this technology so they can be seen and they can impart whatever they have to impart or, do whatever they're planning on doing?
Right. And I mean, that's kind of, the way Escape at Eden is talking in American Cosmic. It's almost like this technology buildup. And even, with the disclosures we're having currently, is almost like, are they preparing us for something? Are they kind of getting us used to the idea of some type of life form that's not known to us currently on Earth, that's not of us, that they're going to reveal to us here in the next, anywhere from 5 to 20 years.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And, in one way, as a researcher, this is a great age of ufology to be involved in. This is a great age of the paranormal and supernatural and high strangeness to be involved in, because we're getting so much information, whether that's rightful information or whether that's, disinformation, who knows at this point. But there's so many people talking right now. But then, in another way, it almost makes you long for the days of 1955, or at least, not to say 1955, because I know that 1955 was a pretty turbulent place for some people, and I'm not going to say that, but it makes you long for the ufology of that age. Let me put it that way. When things were so new and fresh, and so many ideas were being passed around in such an innocent way, you know what I mean? And so many sightings were taking place of weird new stuff, and it was brand new, and it was so weird, and it was happening all the time. And there were these instances like the Kelly Hopkinsville instance, and Lonnie Zamora out in New Mexico crashing into the UFO in Roswell, and all of these major events were happening, and it was just I guess I'm nostalgic for it because I didn't live through it. Maybe there are researchers that have lived that and would say that now is a much better age for the study. But in a lot of ways, I think that inspired us a little more back then. And I think that whatever this perception, I think perception is as important as whatever these things are. And I think back then there was a little more, unreality to the reality of it, and I think maybe that's a good thing. I'm not sure that all this information and all this, is necessarily a good thing. But that being said, I'm glad that it's happening. I know that there are researchers throughout history that wish they were living at this moment to see all these things come out.
Right. This is kind of the era that the researchers, back then was waiting for, and now I think we kind of take it for granted.
Sorry about that. You're absolutely right. I was in the middle of that, and my TV turned on for absolutely no reason. So
there you go.
That creeped me out pretty good. Let me pause it real quick. Sorry. Yeah, that was extremely weird. I was actually watching bedtime stories about the Kentucky Goblins earlier today doing research, which is excellent. I will include it in the show notes if any of you guys aren't familiar with bedtime stories. It is amazing. But all of a sudden, when I was in the middle of that, my TV just turned on to that episode and started playing. So that was odd. But no, you are exactly right, man. I mean, I know that there are researchers today that would love to be at this moment, but I wonder what some of those researchers that have given their life for this work, many of those guys, would have to say about what's happening now as far as all these things go.
Yeah, that would be an interesting take because, a lot of them have dedicated their lives in trying to get disclosure and had ideas and theories, and now it's kind of like, the government that kept things secret during their time, the same government's just kind of handing out information to the New York Times right and left.
Yeah, no kidding. But it's an interesting age to live in for ufology for sure. Here on the 65th anniversary of the Kelly Hopkinsville event, who knew that we would be receiving almost daily information about military and government encounters with UFOs, and it's wild to think about.
Oh yeah, and it's every day. We see something new, and it's kind of like, okay, what's this going to be? And eventually, I think we're working our way up, even with the invention of the Space Force. Although it may be kind of a joke, in a way, to a lot of people, but you have to really think of what's the purpose behind that. Why are we creating this other than, maybe defense of, possibly an adversary country destroying our satellites or doing something nefarious in space. But is there another reason, I must ask, why is this being created? And was there plans to create this before the current president, got into office? Because to me, it looks like it was planned out, the Space Force, prior, because it went up awfully fast, and things like that are not just done in a couple of years. It takes time to create things like that, and they're just not done overnight like it seemed like it was.
Right. Absolutely. What a time to be alive here in the middle of the 21st century. with UFOs and worldwide viruses and, all the craziness in the world. But, to quote J. Cole, no such thing as a life that's better than yours. So I wouldn't want to be taking all of this strangeness on with anybody but you, my brother, and our listeners, because I think we're going to only get stranger from here.
Oh, definitely. I think it's definitely the strange days are here to stay.
Absolutely. And maybe we can all be brought together by the strangeness like Geraldine was talking, hopefully. Again, we want to thank Geraldine so much for coming on the show. It was an amazing interview and an excellent opportunity to get to talk to her about her father and her family's encounter back in 1955. Back in 1955, 65 years ago, this very evening. If you guys would please, like we talked about in the intro of the show, we are working on something very special that could be huge for us regarding the Kentucky Dogman. Anybody with sightings of, canid creatures here in Kentucky, dogmen here in Kentucky, werewolves, whatever you want to call them, sightings, experiences, or just information. If you know something about these things, please hit us up at Midnight in Kentucky Podcast at gmail.com or on our Facebook or Twitter page. We're not excellent at responding, as I'm sure a lot of you guys have already realized, but we will get back to you, I promise. We want to talk to you about your experiences. In addition, just follow us on these social media outlets. We are on Facebook,
Twitter,
YouTube,
midnightkentucky.com.
And leave us those good ratings and reviews. Those help us out so much. You can do that on iTunes or Facebook. Check out the Ransom Letter Publishing TeePublic for all your Midnight in Kentucky merch. And check out the Midnight in Kentucky blog. We got a lot of stuff popping off over there. And lots of good information on the paranormal, supernatural, and high strangeness in Kentucky. Until the next moon rises, Nightowls, for Midnight in Kentucky, I'm Ben.
I'm Stephen.
Good night.
You've been listening to Midnight in Kentucky,
a Ransom Letter Publishing podcast.
Join us on Twitter and Facebook.
Or get in contact with your questions, comments, or stories of high strangeness
at midnightinkentuckypodcast@gmail.com.